Yourself about 12 to 15 inches from the microphone. It does adjust up, down, left, right. Just make yourself comfortable. If you speak directly into the microphone with a loud, clear voice, we'll hear everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please state your name.
Stephanie Murphy.
How do you spell first and last name?
Stephanie is Stephanie. Murphy is Murphy.
And what is your profession?
I'm an attorney.
How long have you been an attorney?
This is my 23rd year as an attorney and actually in the Sarasota-Bradenton area.
And are you with a firm, sole practitioner? What do you do?
My husband and I have our own firm, and I've had that firm for 16 and a half, 17 years. Before that, I was at a larger firm in Sarasota.
And what is your topic of law that you practice?
I practice family law, which is generally comprised of divorce, custody cases, or what used to be called custody cases, and adoption cases.
Okay. I want to ask you about Doug Benefield. Did he hire you?
He did.
And approximately when did he hire you?
He hired me in March 2018. He came for a first consultation on the 13th. He hired me on the 14th of March 2018.
And what was the purpose of your duties to begin with?
Initially, the purpose of hiring me was to draft a letter to Ashley Benefield, who was pregnant with their child at the time, which I did. I drafted a letter and sent it the day after I was retained. But the purpose of that letter was actually just to initiate.
Relevance. She stated that she sent the letter, that she was retained to send the letter. Now going to explain something.
Okay, overruled.
What was the purpose of the letter?
The purpose of the letter was to open the door for discussion about Doug's participation in the upcoming birth of their child, but also to advise that if she did not feel comfortable with him being present at the birth, he was respecting her need for space.
And when did you send that letter?
I sent that letter on March 15th at 9:59 in the morning by email to Ms. Benefield.
And did you receive a response to that letter?
I did not receive a response directly from Ms. Benefield. She checked herself into Tampa General the next day to start induction.
Sustained.
So when was the child born?
Well, the child was born early. She was born on March 19th, I believe, is when she was finally born.
And you said early. How many weeks early was that?
Well, the child was originally scheduled, or her due date was April 8th. So I think
Sustained.
So you said you never received a response
not from Ms. Benefield.
from Ms. Benefield about the letter.
Correct.
And to your knowledge, did Doug ever receive a response to that letter?
To my knowledge, he did not receive any response from Ms. Benefield or anyone on her behalf.
Okay. And I think you might have said this, but the child was born on what day?
She was born on the 19th of March.
Okay. And at the time the child was born, did you or Doug know that the child was born?
No, gosh, we didn't know for a good 5 or 6 weeks after she was born.
Okay. And how did you find out that the child was born?
I actually found out because I had been monitoring the docket for Manatee County court system just because there had been no response. And so on May 6th, I saw that Ms. Benefield had filed a petition for protection against domestic violence on, I think it was April 23rd. So about 2 weeks prior to me finding out, she had filed the petition. And in that filing, there was, she identified the birth date of the child, as well as I think the child's name, which is the first time we learned about that too.
Okay. And you said she filed a petition for, what did you call it?
It's a petition for protection against domestic violence. So it's an injunction. A lot of people refer to it as a restraining order, but it wasn't granted as an injunction at the time.
Okay. So when, just for knowledge of people that may not know, when someone does a request for an injunction, what is sort of the procedure that it needs to go through?
So a person who files a petition for an injunction, they file it at the courthouse in the clerk's office, and then that gets sent up to the judge, usually a family law judge who's just in charge of injunctions that day. And then the judge has three options, I believe. One is just to deny it completely. The second option is to grant a temporary injunction, but then there's a follow-up or a return hearing.
I'll overrule.
And then the third option is what happened in this particular case, is that the judge denied the petition as a temporary injunction, so there wasn't enough evidence in the petition to warrant a temporary injunction, but a hearing was set to review it.
Okay. And when was that hearing set approximately, to your knowledge?
I believe it was originally set for May 8th, but Ms. Benefield made a request to continue that hearing.
Okay, so it was then continued?
It was.
Before the hearing actually happened, did you file any documents on Doug's behalf?
I did. So, well, of course, I filed a notice of appearance in that injunction case. And then we started an entirely separate case. So I filed on Doug's behalf a petition for a parenting plan unconnected with divorce. And so he wanted to establish a parenting plan so that he had really time sharing and decision making for his daughter, because he had none of that up to that point because she was withholding all that information.
And some of the lingo may be familiar to us, but so time sharing, what is that?
I'm sorry. So time sharing is what lay people and a lot of people used to generally call visitation. So it used to have custody, parent had custody, and then another parent had visitation. That was changed, and now in Florida at least, and especially in our circuit, we have parenting plans, which is a comprehensive agreement or an order by the court that lays out all the details of parenting as a not intact family. So the major components are decision making and time sharing schedule. So how often the child spends with each parent.
And you said not connected with a divorce proceeding?
Right.
So I would assume that means it can either be with a divorce proceeding or without.
It can be, and of course it can be also in a paternity case, so parents don't have to be married. But in this case, because they were married, Doug was not initially pursuing a divorce because he hadn't had any contact with Ms. Benefield for a while. His initial...
Sustain.
Okay. So initially it was not connected with divorce.
Right. His priority was his daughter.
And you mentioned the injunction case and then your motions. Were they two different case numbers?
They were two different case numbers. So the injunction case number was 2018 DR 1823. And then the new case that I filed for Doug was 2018 DR 2318. Now, they're companion cases, though, so they might be separate cases, but they travel together as companion cases, and they're assigned to the same judge through this unified family court program.
Okay. So when the hearing was set and ultimately heard, were both of those case numbers heard?
Both of the case numbers were heard, but it wasn't our first pleading wasn't the same pleading that was heard at the time of the injunction.
Objection. It's narrative, non-responsive to the question.
Sustained.
So what generally were the allegations in the injunction petition?
Generally, Ms. Benefield was alleging that Doug had been violent toward her. She alleged that he, I think, had hit the dog, fired a gun into the ceiling. The biggest allegation was that he was poisoning her and their child in utero with heavy metals.
Okay. When was this hearing finally held?
The hearing was held in two parts, actually. It was July 30th, and then the second part was September 17th.
Not responsive to the question, Your Honor.
Overrule.
And that was the year 2018, correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And what judge was this in front of?
It was in front of Diana Moreland.
And you said it was held on 2 days. Why was it held on 2 different days?
It took a very long time. So
Okay.
both sides had experts, toxicologists, and we had a number of other witnesses appearing. We had,
Objection. Not responsive to the question.
Overrule.
there were also people from the Child Protective Team testifying. And so there were too many hours, and so we couldn't squeeze it all into one day.
Okay. And ultimately, at the end of this, did Judge Moreland make a decision?
At the end of that, she did. There
I'm
were
sorry.
other decisions along the way, but ultimately she made a decision on the two matters that were set as the companion cases.
And what I meant was on the second hearing day, did she make a decision?
Yes, she
Okay.
did, September 17th.
And what was that decision?
There were two parts because, there was two cases.
Objection, Your Honor, just final decision.
For the prior motion,
Yes.
overruled.
Go ahead.
Thank you. For the injunction, she made a lot of rulings and a lot of findings about lack of evidence and then denied the petition.
We don't want to talk about
Oh.
what went into that. We just want to know what her
Gotcha.
ruling was.
Okay, she denied the injunction, so
Okay.
that was the first part.
Okay. And then the second part.
The second part was on the parenting plan case, the time-sharing case. And so in that, she entered a ruling for a time-sharing schedule. That would be an introduction schedule because Doug at that point had never met his daughter, and that would increase over time on a temporary basis. And then she entered a ruling that he would have ultimate decision-making authority over the child's medical needs and otherwise share decision-making.
Overruled.
And otherwise, I'm sorry.
Otherwise share parent responsibility, which is joint decision-making.
Okay. And as of that day, was Judge Moreland's ruling timed? Like, was it immediate? Was it in the future for the time sharing? of the
It was
child?
immediate. Well, not that day, but she said the first day, and it was just a couple of days later, the 21st, which is when Doug was supposed to meet his daughter for the first time.
Okay. And this time that Doug met his daughter for the first time, were you present?
I was, yes.
And where did this happen?
It happened at Manatee County Sheriff's Department on, I think it's 301.
Did you arrive together or separate with Doug?
Oh, we arrived separately. When I got there, Doug was already there.
And how old approximately was the baby at the time?
I think she was around 6 months old. She was born in March, and this was then the 21st of September. It's about 6 months.
And can you explain how that interaction went? Did you observe it, first of all?
I did.
Okay, and
So
how did
when
it-
I arrived, I got into Doug's truck and we just waited because we were there early. And then he saw Ashley arrive with the baby. And so he pulled the truck closer and then we both got out of the car and started walking toward Ashley. And then it was just an odd kind of interaction, actually. She turned to me with this nasty look on her face and said to Doug,
Objection.
I'll sustain as to the characterization.
she turned to Doug and said, "Are you dating her?" And so obviously we both said, "Well, of course not, no." And then I hung back, and Doug then was standing there, and Ashley approached him with Emerson, and they started talking. Eventually, she let him hold the baby, and they just kept talking for a few minutes. Then I was advised that they were going to be leaving together, strangely, that Ashley was going to be going with them for the time sharing.
Was this a surprise to you?
Absolutely. We had just been in knockdown, drag out litigation for months with just horrendous allegations that were unfounded. And yet she said, "I want to go with you." And he said, "Okay."
Objection to the characterization of the allegations being unfounded and continued editorializing by this witness.
Can we approach?
Sustained.
So when they told you they were going together, what was your response?
I pulled Doug aside and I cautioned him about going with her. I advised, I'm his attorney, and so I did advise him. I said, "This isn't a good idea. She's trying to set you up for something. don't do this. And he said, I understand, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And so I stayed and observed as Ashley strapped the car seat into the back of the truck, and she got in the truck with Doug, and then they left together for his first time sharing with his baby,
Okay.
for their baby.
So after this first time sharing, did this seem to start a time of peace, so to speak?
It was a time of peace. Actually, before the 26th, but on the 26th, Doug and Ashley both signed a stipulation that I had drafted at Doug's request, which expanded the time sharing that Judge Moreland had ordered at the hearing on the 17th. So within a week, they had already agreed that he was going to have even more time sharing than Judge Moreland had said.
Okay.
And so that was filed in the court file. It took away the restriction of meeting at the sheriff's office if they chose.
Non-responsive.
Overruled.
So yes, that was the beginning of a time of peace that extended for quite a period of time.
And during this time, well, how long did that last, the peace?
It lasted, to my knowledge, about 11 months.
Okay. And during this 11 months, did you see Doug and Ashley?
I saw them in magazines. Actually, they were attending gala events together, and so they were kind of the...
Speculative and hearsay.
Overruled.
So other than seeing them together at the sheriff's office, I didn't personally observe them out in public, but I did. Like I said, I saw them in various forms of media. They're quite the couple.
Okay. And you said this peace lasted about 11 months. What broke this peace to your knowledge?
Well, it was my understanding from Doug that they were getting ready to move in.
Hearsay.
Let's not talk about what happened with what Doug said was supposed to happen. But during this time, did Ashley stop speaking to him?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
During this time, did Ashley stop speaking to Doug?
Objection. How would you know it calls for hearsay?
Effect on the listener.
Overruled.
Thank you. They continuously spoke to one another for 11 months until August 16th of 2019.
Objection. I thought that was a yes or no. Objection, non-responsive.
Sustained.
Okay. So around this time, you said November 16th?
August 16th,
August 16th.
of 2019.
Okay. What happened at this time?
Doug was supposed to be moving in with Ashley and her mother, Alicia. He had moved all of his things in.
And we're not going to talk about the specifics of that.
So, counsel, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could I request the instruction from the court about,
Can we not do speaking objection?
Do you need to approach?